Marketing Expert Series. So we are incredibly lucky today to have Gordon Farquhar, who's one of my ex-students who's had an incredible career with some of the best known companies, games companies in the world. And I've asked Gordon to come on as usual, give a bit, talk about his career, then relate a bit of business to marketing curriculum. So, Gordon, without further ado, over to yourself.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Okay, I'll quickly share my screen, which I think is the phrase of the year right now with everything we're happening with Zoom. So just kind of giving a quick introduction into me and kind of my career journey to date. As kind of David mentioned, I've kind of made my way in the world of video games. So I was a Montfort student between 2010 and 2014. And as part of my course, I took the decision to take a placement year. And kind of I went through probably 40 to 50 different applications at the time, and was successful to get into the Microsoft program, working in the Xbox team. So at the time, very much a dream job for me. And I did a year stint there as an intern before heading back and kind of sitting in David's lecture classes. And then kind of when I finished university, I actually managed to kind of move back to my previous team as well. But this time, instead of being a marketing intern, it was to be a marketing manager. So the role of a third-party marketing manager is two separate things. The first is to try and get you to buy an Xbox instead of a PlayStation. And kind of the role is how we work with third-party publishers like an EA, an Activision, or a Ubisoft, to kind of bring exclusive content or promotions to the Xbox platform. And then the second piece of the game as well, the job as well, is once you have the box, it's all about how do we kind of provide you new games and new services that you could be interested in. So kind of using FIFA as the example, if FIFA 21 is dropping on the 9th of October and you're on Xbox, is how do we partner with you to kind of upsell you to that game? So I think kind of what I loved about that job was just kind of the amount of contacts that I could make throughout the gaming industry, and kind of those contacts ended up paying off when there was a role that opened up to become the FIFA Ultimate Team brand manager. So through the contacts that I knew at EA, they reached out to me and kind of said, hey, we think you should apply for this role. We think you'd be a great fit. And then I kind of went through the interview process, was successful, got the job, then had to go through the immigration process as the role was based in Vancouver in Canada. And I've been doing the Ultimate Team gig for the last 2.5 years. I moved over at the start of 2018. And then I think by the time that this lecture or video goes live, I'll have actually moved jobs again, still staying within EA, but I'll now be kind of working in their commercial team on their subscription, which is just been rebranded to EA Play. And I'll be working on kind of content and partnerships management. So really just kind of thinking about how we take the subscription from what it is now, and how we kind of set it up for the future. And really think about how we develop that and encourage more people into the service. Just kind of knowing kind of where gaming is going, and kind of the introduction of cloud gaming. Just kind of a really exciting time to be thinking about subscription and kind of where that could go in the future.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much for that. Gordon, I don't know if you want to unshare your screen just for a second. So I've asked you to have a think about the kind of work you do now, experiences you've had recently and previous roles, and have a think in a broad way of what parts of the marketing curriculum that you learnt those many years ago. I realise it won't be absolutely everything, but what parts relate to the kind of things that you're involved in, so you can give some kind of context.
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly for my role, the kind of the brand manager role, we are kind of the go-to point between the development organization and then the marketing organization. So if anyone kind of is unfamiliar with those terms, the development team are all about who makes the game, and then the marketing organization is kind of how do we bring that game to market and make sure we're bringing it to the right people. So our focus, just knowing that we kind of sit between those two groups, is we're extremely customer focused. So when I think back to kind of my time at DMU, it's all about how do we do customer segmentation and analysis, like things like FRAC analysis. Obviously, kind of there will be a lot of foundations that kind of we learn in the classroom. And then as you go into the wider world of work, there's kind of minor tweaks that are specific for certain companies, depending on kind of certain data that's available to them and what's not, which allows us to be kind of much more specialized when we look at our players, how they behave and how they engage with our product 365 days of the year.
Brilliant. Okay.
So
Um, is there anything more that you want to kind of relate and share to for that kind of curriculum? I don't know if you've got any slides prepared for that.
100%. So I think that what I'd love to do is kind of talk about something that is impacting everything right
Brilliant.
now, and just kind of wanted to give it a kind of a FIFA slant on kind of the impact of COVID-19. Right? I mean, everyone's feeling this right now. I'm not sure if this is going to go out in the classroom or if this is going to go out online. We're doing this face to face on Zoom, instead of kind of potentially kind of having me up to present in person. So I think kind of everyone's kind of felt the impact of COVID-19. And kind of what I really wanted to do is kind of just give a very recent case study, and some examples of how we've needed to react to the world of football as the world of football has kind of come to a pause around us, and kind of what that means for kind of EA Sports FIFA as a football brand, and for many months the only way to experience football, um, it, in the pause. So just kind of when we think about kind of where we've been, and kind of what we wanted to do, a key thing that we wanted to make sure, is that kind of we had a really clear vision of what we did, but also more importantly, what we weren't willing to do. So our kind of mission statement or our why statement, when kind of we saw all of the leagues kind of closing down or kind of pausing back in March, was we wanted to make sure that we could connect an isolated world through the world's game. So whenever we talk about football and FIFA, it's kind of very much our kind of product positioning is all about how do we deepen your connection to the world's game. And what we saw is that kind of, particularly when kind of people are stuck in their homes, they're not allowed to see friends, is that kind of football was this way that people could continue to connect with a sport they love and people they love through our game. So kind of it was a really interesting opportunity for us. But also we wanted to be super cautious around kind of how we were positioning it. So one of the kind of the early questions and examples that we had is like, hey, do we want to put the game on sale? And kind of we go, there's a ton of people stuck at home. It's a fantastic sales opportunity for us. But kind of we thought long and hard, and we said like, hey, we don't think that's the right move for us. We don't want to kind of be commercializing a global pandemic. But what we do want to do is make sure that the players who have our game are having the best time and that they're able to kind of remain connected. So there's a couple of key buckets when we think about kind of the impact of COVID-19, and then also kind of what that meant for our game itself. So as I kind of like mentioned on the previous slide, when football stopped, FIFA became the easiest way for people to experience football and provided a social platform for friends to unwind with. So kind of example on the slide here is kind of from the Valencia Atalanta game. It's a famous story of a blind fan who Valencia decided to immortalize. And it turned out one of the final games to be played before the kind of the pause in football was that kind of Champions League tie. And Vicente Navarro was the only fan to be in the stadium when that happened. So kind of what we saw is that kind of when kind of lockdown started, that kind of a lot of the engagement that we traditionally see, which potentially kind of over the course of the year slowly winds down until we release a brand new product. We were seeing that kind of people were coming in record numbers where people wanted to play FIFA, but more importantly, they wanted to play FIFA with their friends. So we saw kind of a range of different modes coming in, and people coming in just to play certain modes where they could hang out with their mates, they could chat over voice chat, and just kind of have that social experience of kind of them meeting up and kind of still having that connection for a sport that they love. So then again, when we think about kind of the customer segmentation analysis and kind of what I really mentioned, is that kind of we saw from lockdown gaming and that not just for FIFA but across the industry, there was record numbers of people coming in and playing football. But also kind of what we could see and kind of one of the advantages of being an online games company is that you have a rich source of data available to you from your customers. And what we found is that there is new cohorts starting to emerge with different behaviors to typical new players. So when we think about our player base and kind of really when we apply a COVID-19 lens to them, we can really kind of bucket them into three different groups. Now, when we look at player segmentation and kind of things like FRAC analysis or decile analysis, we've got our own special method at FIFA. So kind of the segmentation model is far more complex usually, but just kind of really simplifying it down into these three types of players for COVID-19. The first was kind of these are players who have never churned from FIFA 20. So this meant that they would have come in potentially in September or kind of November, December, but when they came in, they regularly and continuously played FIFA throughout the year. So they were still planning and actively looking to play FIFA throughout March, April, and May onwards. And kind of what we saw is that kind of for those players, they engaged more than they potentially would have normally. And really just kind of football or FIFA became their football outlet for them. But there was another two groups that we saw as well. The second were what we were calling returning players. So these were players who had come in at some point earlier in the year. They played FIFA for maybe 1 or 2 months, and then they decided like that was enough for me. So they could have. There's multitude of different reasons for why this might have happened. They might have gone, hey, kind of Call of Duty Warzone's just come out, really enjoying that right now, so I'm just going to play that. Don't think there's any intention for me to go back to FIFA. Or they've kind of moved on, they're kind of doing other things. Maybe they've gone skiing for the winter, or kind of they've now got a little baby that they're looking after. So lots of different reasons why, but kind of we saw a group of players who had churned out of the game and it looked like they had no intention of coming back. But what we saw is that again, kind of when you're stuck inside and you've got all of this extra free time, that all of a sudden like FIFA was something that they wanted to come back and play. And again, we saw them kind of engaging in a really positive way. And again, kind of FIFA being that outlet for them. And then the final kind of bucket that we have is kind of what we call new players. So these were players coming into FIFA 20 for the very first time. And these weren't players who had been in previous titles, or at least a previous title. So they were effectively brand new players who hadn't played with the franchise before coming in. And what was interesting is particularly during kind of particularly during COVID and when we look at the way that players behave, is that a core player, someone who's been playing for years and years in a row versus someone coming in for the very first time, they behave pretty differently in game. They don't engage as much. They don't kind of look to spend anything else on our microtransaction business with FIFA points, and they very much kind of they drop in and out and they play casually. But what we saw, that particularly during lockdowns, is that they were exhibiting much more core behaviors. So they were playing more, they were engaging more, they were just kind of getting deeper and deeper into the gameplay loop and really having a great time whilst playing, which is fantastic for us. So, and again, kind of talking about data and the interesting side of things, we obviously have a global platform. So as the kind of the global brand lead, it was almost kind of when we look at kind of the engagement patterns happening in Asia, when we think back to kind of like January, February, March, and kind of we weren't really sure what COVID-19 was. We weren't sure kind of how big it would be. Just being able to see and predict kind of the engagement patterns and models as kind of COVID-19 slowly kind of came across, as different countries reacted differently to the news and the pandemic, we were able to see that kind of reflected in the way that players were engaging with our game as well. So kind of really kind of interesting on the consumer side. And then the second, sorry, the third topic to really talk about is reacting in real time. So one of the big things with FIFA Ultimate Team is that we have two real big types of content. The first is all around authentic content. So this is all about kind of what happens on the pitch and being able to reflect it in game. And then we have inauthentic, which is just kind of more fun fantasy types of content in game. But what we need to do is we needed to have a really big rethink about what that authentic content could be. Obviously, without any real world football, it's tough to have any authentic football content with it. So with each product launch, we had to reassess the product positioning and change it as needed. So kind of a couple of key examples very early on would have been Team of the Week. So this is weekly content based on the real world of football. So for example, here you have Erling Haaland scoring. So if he was to score a hat trick on the weekend, then he'd get a special Team of the Week item in game during the week. Obviously, without all of those games happening, we had to come up with a brand new solution that kind of had Team of the Week level content available for our players, which they know and love. But we also had to have a solution where we didn't know how long this was going to be. Was it going to be a couple of weeks? Was it going to be a couple of months? So we needed to come up with something that could scale. So the solution here for us was Team of the Week moments. So this was kind of really kind of delving into the history of football, pulling out specific examples and kind of really seeing them come to life. And again, kind of one of our major campaigns, Team of the Season, we had planned. It usually coincides with the end of the season. But kind of we knew that the seasons were going to end much later, and again we didn't know when they were. So what we did is we repositioned Team of the Season to become Team of the Season so far. Instead of being a celebration of everything that football has been over the previous season, with Team of the Season so far, we shifted that and turned it into a celebration of everything of football that is still yet to come. So it was all about how do we kind of tie this to the start of the Premier League coming back, the Bundesliga coming back, getting people excited and reminding them of the massive storylines still yet to be told. So would Liverpool go on to win the title? Who was going to get relegated? All of those stories still to be told, and getting people really excited and just kind of repositioning some of our plans, being extremely reactive to the world of football as we needed to be. Another kind of piece as well of kind of like the game, and it's really kind of about art imitating life. So we had the Sound of the Stands program, and potentially kind of for any of the football fans out here, you would have heard about this. It's a little smile from David, kind of throwing in a Leicester Crystal Palace visual there as well, which is my team. It pained me to lose 3-0 here. But as you can see in the background of the King Power, there were no fans. And kind of when we were talking to our big league partners in the Premier League and La Liga, we knew that this could be an issue, and kind of there was questions around kind of what does this mean for the viewing experience for fans. So we partnered with both the Premier League and La Liga to create a sound of the stands broadcast experience. So effectively what it was is it was a soundboard of all of the different audio files that we had in game that we had recorded from real world stadiums. And then we were able to package them up in a way where someone could sit at a game and kind of play the right sounds at the right time to kind of imitate the real world atmosphere. So I think kind of for me, on a personal level, when I heard about this, I was like, absolutely no way. I'm going to watch it with the stadium sound. It's more authentic to what it is. And I think within like 2 minutes of watching it with the stadium sound on, I was like, this is really convincing. And I was like pleasantly surprised. And I think again, just kind of allowing people to kind of simulate that feel of kind of what football could be. or kind of what it should be is a better way to phrase that, and giving people choice, whether kind of you want to have that authentic kind of, I want to hear the defenders barking orders at corners, or whether kind of you want to kind of simulate that idea of kind of fans and being able to react and celebrate to those magical moments when you win 3-0. And then kind of another piece here is just kind of summer showdowns. So as I mentioned, kind of team of the season, we had to kind of really redefine what that was. But what we realized is that we were still missing something special. And when we kind of wanted football to come back, there was such a gap that the people were really hungry for any football content. And we saw that kind of particularly in the UK, where Bundesliga, people were tuning in kind of for weeks at a time ahead of the Premier League coming back. They just wanted to experience football in a major way. And kind of you saw that particularly from a social point of view of kind of like, who's the right Bundesliga team for me to support? And we wanted to kind of take that in our own way for the FIFA world. And the brief was all about how do we make football fans invested in every story still in the balance. So this is kind of like who is going to win the title, City or Liverpool, who is going to get relegated, who is going to kind of win places in Europe in different leagues. And the idea here is that we were going to focus on the big leagues, the big stories, and kind of really brought them to life in the idea of summer showdowns, which were kind of these head-to-head real world match content experiences where you had the option where you could kind of say, I'm a massive City fan and I kind of want to pick up Phil Foden for my team. And you were able to do that. And then based on the real world result, he could then get an additional boost in game just to make him even more desirable and kind of cement his place in your ultimate team. So there was kind of lots of kind of umming and ahhing permutations around this as well. There was a slight chance that the City Liverpool game would have been the title decider. Unfortunately, City lost to Chelsea, I think 3 days beforehand, which kind of changed some of our plans. But kind of really kind of exciting and interesting way to kind of bring the culmination of the season to life in our product. And then kind of when we think about the future and kind of where we go, it's all about how we adapt to the new normal. So kind of this is all about how we redefine go-to-market plans and how we shift from physical events to digital events to allow for consumer trial. So the example here is like this was the FIFA 20 capture event that we ran, where we kind of we invited 100 or more influencers and content creators to a special location just for them to be able to play FIFA ahead of launch for a couple of days. And this year we're exploring kind of how do we do this digitally and how do we unlock this scale and the amount of influencers that we have and who kind of want to create FIFA content. How do we enable them to do that remotely, securely, and in a way that kind of is going to be allowing for the game to be finished and finalized. So lots of complexities of having to build a game from home, but also kind of bring a game to market from home as well. But it's one that we're excited to kind of see through in the last kind of month or so as we run into launch. But that was just kind of a really kind of quick whistle stop tour of just kind of the foundations of kind of what I've learned at DMU, but then also being able to apply them to a real world scenario.
Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic, Gordon. Do you want to unshare your screen for the moment? Um, that was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure there'll be so many massive football fans that will be thinking, I so need Gordon's job. Oh my word, what would I do? For the last bit, have you got any tips and hints for graduates and placement and postgrad students that are looking to get their graduate jobs now?
Great segue. How do you
Y-
get,
y-
if my job's a dream job, how do you get my
Well,
job?
partly that, and just generally, any advice for
Yeah,
graduates?
yeah, absolutely. I think for anyone who's kind of gone through the placement process, a lot of it's going to look and feel the same. Um, and I think I've got kind of a slide of kind of more longer term, like, hey, kind of this would be great for your career. But in terms of explicitly thinking about kind of the graduate job market and kind of what that means, I think the first piece is don't be afraid of rejection. As I mentioned, kind of I got an internship at Microsoft. I applied for probably kind of 50 to 60 different intern programs, and I heard back from 10. And so kind of again, just that kind of scale and kind of getting used to kind of those knockbacks, but also kind of making sure that that doesn't knock your confidence either. I think kind of every application, every interview is a learning moment. So it's all about kind of what is it you can take away. And maybe it's kind of you could kick yourself and go, I wanted to phrase that in a different way. But you'll learn that. And I think it's kind of it's really going through that and having the perseverance. I think as well, it's understanding kind of what's special about you, and why you'd be the right fit for that company. I think again, although I've just said like, hey, it's a numbers game and you need to apply for as many as possible, you also need to do that with a personalized approach. There's nothing worse than seeing a generic CV, and then also kind of being in the recruitment process as well. It's those individual kind of bits of personality, or kind of projects that you've worked on where it's something that you can transfer from your university days to kind of a work project immediately that kind of get you to the top of the pile. I think particularly coming out of a competitive graduate market, it's all about kind of what grades you can get, and kind of really kind of what is helping differentiate you from your other kind of colleagues or graduates at the same time. So it's kind of really understanding kind of what's special about you. And I think a big part of that is going to be passion. I think for me, obviously, I'm a massive football fan, and I'm a massive gamer. I've kind of been able to combine both of those things in the FIFA role. But I think for me, kind of again, kind of working at Xbox, that was kind of really kind of helping sell me in, and kind of helping me get that role. But I think it's really kind of finding the right role for you and then kind of really going for it, but not being afraid to kind of not being sorry, I'm gonna rephrase that. Being able to kind of see the move and kind of where you want to go, and kind of understanding it's kind of what is that transferable moment. So even if it's not something where it's the dream job straight away, it's all about how does that help you get there. So again, for me, it's like, hey, if I love gaming and I love football, I can either kind of go the football route or I could go the gaming route. But just kind of being really clear on like this is what I'd love to do, and then having a really open and honest kind of look at yourself and saying like, what do I need to get there, and how could this role help me get there, and that will kind of really help you have that drive and that passion for the role.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much for that. And one last question for you, Gordon. If you could give one piece of advice for your graduate self, what would it be?
Find the right manager. So kind of I put together a slide. It was like I'm all about finding a future. It's like find your passion, which I've talked about. Find the right manager, which I think is really key. And then I think just kind of where I'm at, a couple of years out of uni now, and it's kind of more about finding your work-life balance and understanding that work-life balance doesn't mean 9 to 5. It means 19 to 90. And there'll be some times where you want to work kind of flat out and really invest in your career, and then there'll be other times where maybe kind of you want to kind of get that balance back. But for me, it's finding the right manager. I think the whole way through, kind of education doesn't stop at when you graduate the Montfort. Like you'll constantly be learning new things every day, right the way through your career. And if not, then I think you've got bigger issues there, where it's just like you've got to constantly be learning and keeping up. And I think the example I use here is kind of with managers. It's like the whole way through school and probably university as well. You've got that favorite teacher where that favorite teacher pushed you that extra 10%. They helped you through something, and they really kind of helped shape who you are as a person. I think for me, kind of, it's going to sound a little bit cheesy, but I loved kind of working with David in his course, on his modules. And again, kind of working with him on open days, coming back and doing lectures as well. I think kind of you've got to find someone who wants to be invested in your future. finding that right manager is so key. I was extremely lucky. I lucked into a great manager in my first role, and that really helped kind of like develop me as a person and professionally. Where it was just kind of really going through and going, okay, right, where can you get better? Where when you kind of leave university, you're not going to be the finished article, and 5 to 6 years after leaving university, I'm still not the finished article. So it's that constant improvement, and having someone who has your back and is able to give you that guidance and kind of push you through those first couple of years is going to be really critical for you. And also as well as kind of as you think about your career, um, they'll also help you define the type of manager you want to be. The kind of you can work for your career, maybe you become a people manager, maybe you don't. Um, but there's a lot you can learn from kind of the way people manage. And I do kind of see a ton of similarities between teaching styles, managing styles. But it's kind of all about kind of that mentor role. So you want someone who is both a mentor and a manager.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. Gordon Farquhar, thank you very much for being the marketing expert today. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.